You're doing good to inquire into truth. I want to introduce you to a few concepts just to contemplate. If God is infinite, no boundaries, how could God be contained in a definition, which is boundaries? Truth has nothing to do with beliefs. Truth is what is before any mental filters are applied. You cannot have objects without space. Science is a language used to describe something and formulate projections. It itself is not evidence. Evidence is what is happening before any descriptions or mental interpretations. It is possible that science is not evolved enough to describe the undercurrent that faith rides upon. Who could have written the scriptures? Did the writer know something that the reader did not? Could someone have gone to the other side and returned to tell about it? The story isn't the happening reality. The map is not the territory, as it has been said. Truth does not come by experience. Modalities of thinking come from experience, and thereby behaviors are formulated from such. Truth is what is before thought and before identification or mental biasing is associated with the happening reality. Two of the biggest hurdles in discovering the greater depths of our existence are the concept of time, which ultimately isn't real, and the identity we carry in the storyline in the head, which is imposed upon the imaginary timeline. The order of evolution is an ever-present unfolding reality and has nothing to do with a past and future, but rather a vantage point of mental filtration placed upon it like a cookie cutter on dough. So forget about what you've been told to believe and look deeper into why the scriptures and holy books have existed for so long. Seek the deepest wisdom possible within, and they will show you the essence of life in that experience. Just as if you follow certain pointings or signs going down a highway or down a street, if you're looking for some particular place and there are signs pointing to it, if you follow those signs, you will arrive somewhere. You will arrive where they are guiding you. The scriptures are no different, but they are not pointing so much to the outer world. They're pointing to the inner world, which is of primary importance. Confusion happens by seeking answers outwardly. Resolution happens by seeking answers inwardly. Resolution and confusion are interdependent. They cannot exist without the other and are not separate from one another. They appear as polar opposites only because of the modality of thought that we are separate from one another. We're taught to define phenomena by identifying its boundaries. Instead, I invite you to observe the dance between the two extremes and see what is actually happening. You will see it is one dance, not two fixed positions at war with one another. Picking sides of any sort is still using the common mental modality. It is the lower nature's modality. It is the ignorant modality. And that is not a judgment against anything. That's simply what is visible when the higher consciousness is grown into. One matures out of ignorance and into a much more clear state of existence, a lighter, freer state of existence inwardly. And it's these inward fruits that make all of the difference in our experience of life. Life is not our experience. Life is what receives the reports of the experience. Life is not the experiencer, it is the experiencing. What is there that could experience something as an experiencer relies on mental stories. Stories of past and future only. But in the dance, the one dance, there is no past or no future. It's happening. This is it. It's much easier to simply observe what is happening. Don't throw away faith, because if you had some way of meeting someone in hell, you would surely see that faith is all they have. Such faith would be invested in change. It is therefore a good idea not to hastily rid oneself of faith simply based on an open possibility of a reality yet undiscovered. Who are the wise beings from which the Scripture emanated? What exactly is it that they see or saw in order to write the Scriptures and to live according to their wisdom, that higher wisdom? I venture to say that it is possible that many behind the pulpit do not see clearly as the wise, due to so much political interference, picking sides, forming policies which are a kind of invisible fence, divisions, power. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That's in the scriptures. Who could say such a thing? What understanding? Where were they looking from? How did they understand? Not just what did they understand? How did they understand? And why did they understand what they were speaking? Because truth gave them the power of discernment. Truth enables discernment on levels that are not caught up in picking sides. Nothing taking sides will reveal what the wise see. They see and saw happiness. Not a happiness that was dependent or is dependent upon objects in the external world, objects in the physical, the manifest, the world of form. Not happiness based on what has been created, but happiness that comes from a place that's not separate from one's deepest core of existence. They see the freedom in truth. They see the destruction that truth brings to illusion. They see the dissolution of boundaries, but not from a position of picking sides. The position of truth isn't concerned with battling against other factions, other groups, other associations, other forces, because truth and love are one. It's said that love conquers all. Well, love conquers the conqueror. There is no duality with love. There isn't love as the conqueror who conquered those who were in opposition to love. That isn't love. Love isn't dualistic in that respect. It's beyond the dualistic nature. But it's so far beyond and so vast that it also includes the dualistic nature. Sometimes the mind would like to come in and present oppositions, dualities to choose from, to pick sides, to be right. And it's like an addiction, really, that most people aren't even aware of. We have to step out of that mode in order to see that it's something that's happening. If one is one with such a mode, they're blind to it. It's what's called a scotoma, a mental blind spot. And that's darkness. but it isn't wrong. It also isn't right. It's just darkness, and there's suffering there. And something knows that suffering is not the most pleasant place to be. Something receives that message very clearly. But who that is, the one that's receiving the message, see, this is where one has to be able to discern, is that one true or is that one false? But it isn't really about picking sides of being right because it's true or being wrong because it's false. It's just a matter of, is it real or is it an illusion? You can go down the highway and see a mirage, and you can think that there's water ahead on the road. It may be quite hot outside, and the pavement on the road is so hot that there's all this moisture over the next course of a mile or so, or perhaps a few kilometers if you want to look at it that way. And so you see really like an aggregate of moisture over a long distance. But because the view is a linear view, it appears a certain way. But if one could have the wisdom to be present in an area where there had appeared to be some kind of water, rain, or perhaps a pond or pool of water collected way ahead on the road, if one is present during the passing through that area, it is seen that that water is totally an illusion. Totally an illusion. The moisture in the air, sure, that's there, but it's not the pond that it appeared to be 1 mile before. So, kilometers, whatever. The ego is like that. The ego is like the pond that doesn't really exist. The person, the ego, the identity as the body-mind, in the mind, in the head. It's a story. It's just a story. There's some kind of apparent substance to it because of all of the memories, all of the traffic of what happened, and all of the projections of what could happen. What is it that the wise saw? They saw the presence of truth, not as facts, not as conceptual arguments. Presence. Without being present, there is really no application for faith. Without being present, there's only mental traffic and the suffering in the emotions that comes as a byproduct of that unconscious dynamic. When we pass through the mirage, that's when the aha moment comes. But for the one who's thirsty in the desert, that aha moment may not look so good. Luckily, you could never be the one who's thirsty in the desert. Although you may believe frequently that you are thirsty, and you are the thirsty one in the desert, And there's nothing else you could be but the thirsty one in the desert. Something is able to see that. And that somethingness, that place that's looking, where you are looking from, you are one with that place. It's deeper. It's deeper. There's a famous sage from the East. He was still in the body in the 40s. And his name is Ramana Maharishi. Some say Maharishi. He had an experience when he was a teenager. And something was happening with him. Some say it was a panic attack where he thought he was going to die. And you can look into this. There's plenty of material available. But apparently he fell down on the ground in fear, and he was trembling, for he was afraid that he was about to die. And in the middle of that fear, he came to an understanding within himself where he said that if this is going to be it, if this is how I die, I don't want to miss it. And so in that moment, he came to an acceptance of what was happening. So once he met that projection, which appeared to be so ominous, he met it from a place of acceptance and presence. He became present with it. The projections no longer had any value. And as a byproduct, he was freed from those projections. It turns out that it didn't kill him, but he had awakened spiritually in a deep, deep way in that moment because of the intensity of the experience. He was able to be free and find peace. So you can be free. Not you can be free sometime in the future, but I mean right now. Whatever illusions seem to be on the horizon, try to understand that they're just projections right now. If they're not really happening right now, they are only projections right now. They may be based on statistics, and they may have a great statistical chance of unfolding the way that they are predicted statistically. However, who can know for sure that that's the way it's going to turn out? Until it actually unfolds, that meeting of reality in the manifest, there can't be any knowing of whether those projections are real or are not real. There is a higher reality from which to view these dynamics. Not that you have to get there. It's because it's not that you aren't there. You are there. You are there right now. So really, how this unfolds, how the spiritual transformation unfolds, is really based in the destruction of the illusions that one is carrying. In the Bible, the scriptures talk about this as casting off the works of darkness. Casting off the works of darkness, or the armor of darkness, in exchange for the armor of light. I want to talk real briefly here about darkness and light. Our eyeballs have been trained to associate the presence of light in the physical domain as light, to associate it with the word light. So as that word, when we see light or we acknowledge light with our physical eyeballs, the brain can readily tell a story about light and use the word light. This is not the same meaning that the scriptures are talking about. When they say light and darkness, they are speaking about the seen and the unseen. And the unseen happens because of the lack of awareness, the lack of presence in awareness. So it's the presence of awareness which is the shining light. That which we can see in our inner experience, such as our present emotions, our current our mood, or the pains perhaps in the physical body. We can feel those, we perceive those. So if we can go to those pains or to those moods, that's the kind of light that the scriptures are talking about, because the scriptures are concerned about spiritual reality much more than they are the physical reality. So that light is awareness which has presence, a quality of presence. Just like driving through the Mirage, once you reach the area where the Mirage surely appeared to be and isn't there, there's an awareness and a presence there. This is the light. But if the mind only hears this and doesn't allow the meeting of the reality to happen, then there remains nothing but darkness. Because the light that the scriptures are talking about is the place where the awareness abides. The place where the awareness abides. And darkness is ignoring that place. Darkness is ignoring the power to recognize that the mirage isn't real when it's searched for. There can be an exploration that takes place in these projections in the mind. The mind is not really your best friend as long as you're believing every projection and you're weighing the possible outcomes. What to do about this? What to do about that? Why? Why is this what to do so important? What can I do? How can I get ahead? What can I get that will help me become better than yesterday? Or what can I do that can get me more of what I already like? Or anything with these two words, more and better. Without awareness, without presence and awareness, which are really the one thing. It's one existence. Not really a thing, but it's an existence. One happening. One dance. Awareness and presence. When this is unfolding consciously, then all of those illusions, all of the mirages, all of the problems, all of the suffering that comes from the one who's thirsty in the desert and sees up ahead the water, because it appears there's water, the desire, the craving for that water becomes much more intense. Sure, the thirst can be real, but the thirst that's based upon projection, it isn't real. Not until proven real. But the only thing that can prove it is meeting it in the present. See, the mind would like to come in and take shortcuts because it still thinks that there's some kind of a solution out there in the future somewhere, because it doesn't want to be present with the reality that's here. It doesn't want to verify the reality in the present, usually. It can't. Mind is past and future. And so it wants to see problems. It wants to see a greater desire, so that if there is water down the road, if there actually is water, if it turns out that there's water, then oh, what great desire there will be to have that water. And if there is that water, then the thirsty one who reaches it will be validated in having such intense desires. The mind loves this kind of thinking. The mind loves to engage these kinds of modes, which are absolutely wasting the attention. That could be used to reach beyond desire. To desire to become desireless. That's another dance which isn't two extremes. What more can I say for this? Until you see that you're not the thirsty one in the desert, you're going to need as much faith as you can get. But the whole clue that makes that faith useful is in where to apply the faith. Where to apply it. Really, when to apply it. Because from the egoic mode of thinking, future always appears to be better than reality here. Because it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that can be filled with whatever thoughts seem to be pleasant enough to occupy that mental state. Or perhaps it's the doom and gloom side of things. Perhaps there's so much anxiety about how bad things are going to be in the future. But wait a minute. What about the present moment in all of this? If we bring presence to the mirage disappears. Or proves itself to be a pond. Your thirst for the pond is really what's in question. Who is it that is thirsty for the pond is the deeper question. Of course, it's just an analogy. You may be thirsty for you may appear thirsty for something. But where you are in truth, it isn't concerned about that. It can't be wrapped up in that. If it were wrapped up in that, who would be there to observe it? There's freedom where you are. Where you are has access to sow seeds and reap fruit, which is the fruit of the Spirit, to tend to the garden, to be stewards of the land. Blessings.